Welcome back to Sew Happy. Today we're making a beautiful classic turtleneck sweater using the free sewing pattern from Unfettered Patterns. It's one of these wardrobe staples that works for everything, cozy days at home, a dressy night out, or anything in between. With its snug collar, relaxed silhouette, and cuffs and waistband, the fit is timeless and the length is perfect for tucking into your favorite shirts and pants. For my version, I'm using a yellow washed cotton sweatshirt fleece from Cali Fabrics. It has just the right structure plus that soft, fleecy warmth on the inside that gives the finished piece a polished store-bought look. And speaking of store-bought, I'm adding a fun applique embroidery to the front. This Route 66 design, which is a free download from planetapplique.com, comes in several sizes, and I'm using the largest one for this project. I'll walk you through the full DIY embellishment process step by step. This sweatshirt comes together quickly, no hemming needed because all the raw edges are finished with bands. I'll be sewing everything on my regular sewing machine and sharing all the stitch settings along the way in case you're doing the same. Let's get started. Here is my front bodice piece. Since I'm choosing to add embroidery, I'm going to do that embroidery first before I construct the project. I'll hoop some tearaway stabilizer, spray some basting spray, and place the wrong side of the fabric onto the stabilizer, aligning the center as well as aligning where I want the center of my embroidery to be with the center of the hooping. Now I'm ready to take this front bodice piece to the embroidery machine. I'll select my design and let it stitch out the first placement stitches. I've chosen and interfaced the fabric that I want to be the background of my image, and I've placed it on top of my placement stitches, then run a second row of stitches. Now I can use my applique scissors to trim close to those stitches. Then we'll take it back to the embroidery machine and run the satin stitches. And I'll repeat that process to complete the design with my remaining interfaced scrap fabrics. The embroidery is done. I'll tear away my stabilizer, and we're ready to sew. Place your front and back pieces right sides together. Pin the shoulder seams. Sew both seams with a 3/8 inch seam allowance and press the seams open. Then we'll pin and sew our side seams with a 3/8 inch seam allowance and press them open as well. Fold your sleeve in half right sides together and pin the sleeve seam. Sew with a 3/8 inch seam allowance and press the seam open. Fold the cuff right sides together. Sew the short seam with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. With that cuff seam pressed open, I'll fold this piece in half wrong sides together. And I'll mark the quarter points along the raw edges. Turn your sleeve right side out and mark the quarter points along the bottom raw edges. Place the cuff and the bottom of the sleeve right sides together, aligning each of your points and pin in place. I'm aligning my cuff seam with the sleeve seam. Now I'll sew the cuff in place all the way around with a 3/8 inch seam allowance, slightly stretching that cuff to fit from point to point. Repeat to create both sleeves. With the bodice wrong side out and the sleeve right side out, place the sleeve inside the bodice so that the pieces are right sides together, aligning the seams. Also align the notches so you know you're attaching the correct sleeve to the correct side of the bodice. Pin in place all the way around. Sew with a 3/8 inch seam allowance all the way around, repeating for both sleeves. Fold your waistband piece right sides together. Pin the short end. Sew at 3/8 of an inch and press the seam open. Fold the waistband in half wrong sides together and mark the quarter points as we did for the cuff. Also marking the quarter points of the bottom of the bodice. Place the waistband and the bottom of the bodice right sides together, aligning your points and pin in place. And I'm placing the seam of my waistband at one of my side seams. Sew the waistband in place, stretching the waistband slightly from point to point with a 3/8 inch seam allowance, just as we did for the cuffs. Fold the neckband right sides together and sew the short end with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. I've pressed my seam open, now I'll fold it wrong sides together. Pin the quarter points, as well as the quarter points of the neckline. Place the collar and the neckline right sides together and pin in place at the quarter points. You can place the seam of the collar at one of the shoulders or at the center back. Sew with a 3/8 inch seam allowance all the way around, slightly stretching that collar to fit from point to point. 3/8 inch seam allowance. Optionally, you can choose to top stitch the seam allowance of the neckband in place using a twin needle or a zigzag stitch. I've just used a wide zigzag stitch here. You can repeat the same process to top stitch the seam allowance of your hemband as well, with that seam allowance pressed up toward the main body. And now the sweatshirt is complete. Thank you for watching this sew along. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future sewing tutorials, and I'll see you in the next video.